every week I have started to ask you guys, you chat, what do you want me to talk about each week? And the winning vote was how to price. And this one is personally my favorite one because I got done with a show on Sunday and I have lost track of how many people simply do not know how to, well, not, let me back up. People know how to price, but it's the consistency of pricing that I feel like people are starting to have a little bit of an issue with because there is so much data and so much to go off of because everyone does it different. So I'm going to tell you guys how I do it, both from a buyer perspective and a seller perspective. And I feel like you can clip this video and send it to whoever because this is how I do my business. It's been really good. I've gotten nothing but positive feedback from it. So I'm just going to basically speak from my experience so that you guys don't get scammed. I don't want you guys watching me to get scammed by people selling you cards or you getting scammed buying cards over market. So let's start off with the basics, chat. So when we're talking about Pokemon, we're talking about two categories now. It's just that we're 2025. Welcome to 2025. These are the things we got to focus on. Number one, physical raw cards. Not online. I know PSA is doing this like online NFT crap, but we got the, if I don't use that. So we have raw and we have graded. Okay, so we have two different categories of cards, raw and graded. Raw is 9 times out of 10 going to be TCGPlayer. Graded, it's going to be a combination of two. I'm going to tell you both what I use. I use eBay, last sold. So last sold, and I'm going off screen again. So eBay, last sold, and alt. I like, in terms of like all the apps that people use, I really like alt for graded. And on a side tangent, I'll tell you guys why I do so far. It's not sponsored in any way, but it's the only app that I've seen so far that does this. When you look at prices and look at sold listings on alt, it will actually tell you if something has been relisted or canceled. Because when people use, and you can see, some of you guys might be wondering, hey, Galaxia, why didn't you put price charting on there? Well, I'll tell you why I didn't put price charting on there. Because there are so many sales that don't go through that are listed there as a actionable or a tangible data set. And that's bad. Don't do it. Bad, chat. Bad. Because sometimes those weren't realized. Those were not realized sales. So that's why I don't use price charting. I use eBay and alt because those directly, alt's API to eBay is probably one of the best that I've seen because it shows canceled and relisted items. So you can factor that into the price for graded. Our apps like Collector Good, I've been using for both. Honestly, food, I've heard people using Collector. I haven't personally tried using it, but I'm not opposed to it, I guess, because I personally don't have any stake in the game. So the next thing that I do for pricing, and this is even before we're even assessing condition, chat. This is way before doing any of it. So when you're looking at a price, so let's say that you are on TCGPlayer looking at a near mint copy, right? And then I'll go into the specifics of condition and whatever. Here's how I calculate price. So for raw, what I do is so just like think about it from like for whatever thing you watch, like content wise for vendor POVs or whatever, a lot of people say at least 3 things. They're either going to tell you this is the average of the card. They're going to tell you this was the last sale of the card. They might even be so bold as to say this is what's currently active, the lowest active listing of the card. So what the frig do we do with all that information, right, chat? I'm going to tell you what we do. And I'm going to tell you what I do. So what I do for most cards, for TCGPlayer, under a specific dollar amount, it kind of goes both ways. But I do market price and then plus the last sold and then divide that by 2. So I do the average. So I do the average of what TCGPlayer says is the market plus the last sold within reason. Within reason. So for example, if there's a card that, you know, has been doing sale after sale after sale of like 20 bucks, 25, whatever, and then the last sale is like 75, I'm not going to factor in the 75. That is clear either market manipulation or money laundering or something crazy that happened. So you have to kind of fall back on the averages if need be. And if you need to fall into the averages, I always do the last 3 to 5 sales within a 6-month window is how normally I do it. So in short, use the market price for the condition, add the last sale within reason, as long as it's not like, wow, like if you have the thought of, wow, that's super high or wow, that's super low, don't use it. Use something that's more consistent. Average those together, and then you'll have your market. So let's say that, let's just do a brand new, one here. Don't save this beautiful work of art. So let's say, and let me just make sure I don't blind you guys and make sure that I'm in my range here. So let's say that a card market, so let's say market is like $100. Last sale is 90. So the total of this, I know math here, would be 190. And then divide by 2, so because we're doing the average, right? And don't mind me, I'm just going to be using a calculator for some basic math because I am a gamer and I don't know how to do it. So we're at 95. So if I had this card at my show, I would list market at 95. So because the last sold was 90, market's 100, so the last sale can kind of help you determine that the market might be trending down. So that's why I do the last sale, because the last sale is a good canary in the coal mine, so to speak. That's why I do it like that. So for graded, it's kind of the same, but in a different way when kind of determining market. So when grading's involved, here's what I do. So first, I normally just use alt. So let's say, I'm trying to think of an example here. So let's say that on alt for a, I don't know, like a PSA, like let's say a PSA 8, I don't know, Blastoise, right? So, and let's say that all these are from like August through June of 2025, right? So let's say that, last sales are like 300, we got maybe 280, we got 260, we got 279, and let's say we have like a 310, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all within this August to June area. So what I do to start with something like this is I average all 5 of those together. So what we get is we get 300 plus 280 plus 260 plus 279 plus 310 equals 1,429 divided by 5. So the average, roughly, is going to be 285.8 is the average of these 5 values. So in addition, so it goes back to what I was trying to make the point. Some people use an average, but some people use the last sold. So I like to add a little bit more weight to the last sold because, again, what I said before with raw also applies here, that the last sale is almost, in some instances, the canary in the coal mine, so to speak, because most people are going to see that and reference that often if it's within their favor. If it's going down, for example, they'll always average it. So in this case, we would add plus 300 because that was the last sale. And then so we divide that by 2, right? So the 285.8 plus 300 equals 585, divided that by 2. So the average of the 2 is going to be 292.9, or in this case, I would probably round it up to 295. So 295 would be my market price, or what I would sticker it at my table for a graded card. So that's how I do the pricing for graded. So before I continue, to summarize, for ungraded, use TCGPlayer, sort by the assessed condition, which I'll kind of get to in a second with assessed condition, but let's say that you think it's near mint. Select near mint, add the market price plus the last sale. Make sure it's within reason because the market can sometimes get manipulated. So if you're worried, just do the last 3 to 5 averages. Add both those values together and divide by 2. And that's what you get for market price for raw. And then round up or down however you need to by 5. That's how I do it. For graded, I use a combination of eBay last sold and or alt. I primarily stick with alt because I haven't had any issues so far. You add all of the last 5 sales together within a 6-month period. Add them together. Divide by that number. So in this case, We added 5 numbers together. We divided by 5, so we got the average of the last 5 sales. Plus the last sold price, in this case was 300, because people like to tend to weigh that in during their thought process of what's market. So I add the average of the 5 last sales plus the last sale, divide by 2, and I get what I would list as market price. That's how I've always done it. And it's been good. It's been really good. So that's how I do that. So from a buyer's perspective, you know, you come to this, you see the stickered, and you say, okay, first you go in with the tips I just said. You go, if it's a raw or a graded, you go through the steps. You determine, okay, am I at market? Am I above market? Am I below market? What's going on? The one thing that I am seeing a lot of folks overlook, and I think it's a very important thing to note with folks who are impacted by sales tax, is the absence of sales tax in most situations at shows. And why I bring this up is that it is very important, and most buyers tend to overlook it. And most sellers tend to be defensive, including myself. I've been trying very hard not to come off as being defensive. It's the last thing I'm trying to do, but sometimes it comes off as such. And why do I bring that up? So, for example, if someone brings, like, let's say that we just did this PSAA Blastoise math, and it comes out to $295 online. If I were to buy this card online, if I sticker this at $295, the moment I hit the checkout screen, for example, I have to pay 8% sales tax when I buy something online, right? So $295 times 0.08, I have to spend an additional, so if I do sales tax, is roughly $23.60. So really, if I were to buy this Blastoise, it would not cost me $295. Instead, it would cost me the 23.6 plus $295. So really, the adjusted, right? So the adjusted price would really be $318.60. So the card really doesn't cost me $295. It really costs me $318.6 because I have to pay sales tax. I cannot skip sales tax as an online buyer. So when you look at prices online, and if I had, like, if we're in, you know, the state that I'm in, which is in New York, if you're at a show and I have to legally pay sales tax, I have 2 options as a seller to make. I can either charge you the sales tax, so you pay the extra 23.6, or I take it out of my profit. So I basically give you what's called the out the door price. So out the door. So out the door price is really the $295. So when you buy this Blastoise from me, you only pay $295. But once I'm done, I have to give Uncle Sam an extra 23.6. So really, I only make off the sale $271, and I know I'm kind of running out of space here, so $271.4. I'm not making $295. I'm making $271.4 because I have to pay the sales tax at the end. I'm not putting that cost on you. I'm putting that cost on me. So as a buyer and seller, I know I'm kind of going back and forth here. Sales tax has to be considered if it applies to your state. If you're in person, online is different because there's establishing nexus and whatnot. But in person, that is something you have to consider. That, you know, when you're negotiating, you're also go into it knowing that you're not going to have to pay sales tax, which should be a savings of X%, X being where what sales tax you would have to be charged at the county that you're in, wherever state you're in. So I tend to I tend to articulate that to the customer to say, you're saving X amount of money because this is the out the door price. Like, the market price, what you're seeing online is exactly what you're seeing on the sticker. but it's the out-the-door price. You don't, not only do you not have to pay the sales tax, but you also get to not have to worry about shipping, and you have the card today. And there is some value in that. But I also think, and I also understand that people want that number to be lower, because there are people that make it tough for me as someone who's trying to keep it by the book and above table. There are people who simply don't collect or claim their sales tax, which they can offer lower prices because they're doing things under the table. But for me, I just accept that, to where I just, as long as I'm above board and as long as I establish that trust through transparency, that's as best as I can do. Because at the end of the day, I'm not going to go red because someone wants, 10% off my sticker, which would make it 18%, right? So the minus 10% from giving them the 10% off, plus the extra negative 8% that I have to pay, which then the thing I like to remind myself is I go to these shows to not have to sell on eBay, because my fees on eBay is around 13 to 15%. So anything lower than that, it just make like, why am I here? You know what I mean? And I want to be there. I want to be there. So, so just kind of keep that in mind when you're negotiating. Just know that if you're dealing with a legitimate vendor, everyone has to pay sales tax at the end of the day, whether it's using Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, how they've identified themselves as a business. Just know that sales tax has to be paid somehow, whether it's put on you as the buyer or put on me or put on us as the seller, if that makes sense. So that's always kind of good to kind of factor in. And sometimes it's always good, sometimes from a seller's perspective, and I can kind of give you from my perspective. Sometimes it's, if I have to, sell something at a 16% fee to get repeat business, that also has an inherent value to me as a seller, because that means you will come back if my rates are good, which I've had people do that too. So that's kind of the both sides of the coin. So hopefully that kind of helps you guys how to kind of do pricing 101. So in short, use TCGPlayer, graded. In my opinion, use eBay last sold or alt if you're trying to select an app. I factor in a good rule of thumb, just to kind of, for both raw and graded, you average the last 3 to 5 sales, omit anything crazy. That's kind of use your best judgment. Average those together, and then once you get the average of that number, add the last sale, and then average those two numbers together to get your market price. And that's both from the buyer's perspective and the seller's perspective. And then if you're in a state that has to process sales tax, realize that that cost has to go somewhere. And so if it's not going to the buyer, it's going to the seller, and both parties need to kind of be aware of that and respect that. Because if someone says, well, I could buy it right now for X amount, and you're in a state that charges sales tax, then that's a good thing to bring up to say, well, if you bought that online right now, you would have to pay an additional 8% because you have to pay sales tax. It just is what it is. So that's kind of how I do it. Hopefully that helped.